Dust covered the broken streets, and silence pressed down like a heavy blanket. The human walked slowly, carrying a small pack on his shoulder. He had been traveling for hours with little food left. Around him, ruined houses stood like skeletons, black smoke still rising from some corners. He stopped when he heard a sound, soft, shaky breathing, almost like a whimper. His hand tightened on the strap of his pack as he looked around. Behind a fallen wall, he saw her. She was small, thinner than any child should be, with skin pale and marked by hunger. Her eyes were large, glowing faintly in the dim light, and they stared at him like a wild animal unsure if he was friend or enemy. Her clothes were torn, her knees scraped, and dust clung to her hair. She did not speak, only watched him with a mixture of fear and hope. The human reached into his pack and pulled out the last piece of bread he had saved for himself. His stomach twisted at the thought of losing it, but something in her eyes made him step forward. Slowly, he crouched and held it out. She flinched at first, ready to run, but the smell of food made her freeze in place. Her hands trembled as she reached forward, grabbing the bread like it might vanish if she moved too slowly. She ate in quick bites, desperate and messy, as though she hadn't tasted real food in days. The human stayed quiet, watching her. She finished almost too quickly and then looked up at him again, crumbs on her lips. Her voice was small, almost a whisper, but her words made his breath catch. "You gave me food. Now I will give you family." He blinked, unsure he had heard correctly. Family? It sounded too strange. He laughed once, awkward and dry, shaking his head. But the girl didn't laugh with him. Her glowing eyes stayed locked on his face, serious and steady, like she had just made a promise. He tried to speak, to tell her it was only food, but she lifted her chin and interrupted. "You are not like the others. They only kick me away. They spit at me. But you gave me food. You are the one I waited for." The human shifted uncomfortably. He had seen beggars before, had given food to strangers, but no one had ever said something like that to him. He looked around, uneasy, as though someone else might step out and explain this strange moment. But the street was empty. Only the girl remained, her expression calm, almost proud, though her body was thin and weak. "Listen," he said finally, his voice low. "I don't know who you are. I just wanted to help." She shook her head fast. "Help is only the beginning. You do not understand yet, but you will. My mother is waiting. She will see you, and then you will see." His chest tightened. He wanted to ask more, but her sudden movement startled him. She stood up, still small and fragile, but her eyes burned with determination. She pointed down the ruined street toward shadows where the buildings leaned together. "Come, I will show you," she said, and her voice was no longer a whisper. The human frowned. Every instinct told him to be careful. He had no idea who her mother was or why a starving alien girl would make such a strange offer. Still, something about her steadiness, the way she refused to break eye contact, made it hard to turn away. He remembered her trembling hands snatching the bread, her body shaking with hunger. If he left, she might collapse and die alone. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Fine. Show me," he muttered. Her lips curved in the smallest smile, one that looked out of place on such a tired face. She stepped forward, her bare feet quiet against the rubble, and he followed, though his heart beat faster with every step. As they walked, he noticed how silent the city was. No voices, no traffic, only the sound of their footsteps and the distant groaning of broken metal. Once, he thought he saw movement between the shadows, but when he looked again, there was nothing. The girl walked without fear, as though she had done this path many times. "Why me?" he asked suddenly. She glanced back, her glowing eyes catching a trace of light. "Because you gave me bread. No one else would. That means you are different. That means you are the one." Her words were too certain, too strong for someone so young. He wanted to argue again, to tell her he was just a traveler with nothing left but scraps. But before he could, she stopped in front of a half-buried door. The building leaned dangerously to one side. Bricks cracked and blackened, but the door stood firm. She turned to him, her expression serious once more. "She is inside," she whispered. "My mother. You must meet her." The human stared at the door, his mind racing. He hadn't planned for this. He had only given food to a starving child, but now he stood at the edge of something he didn't understand. The girl's eyes did not waver, waiting for his answer. He hesitated, his breath loud in the still air. He knew that one choice, to follow or to turn away, would change everything. The wooden door creaked when the girl pushed it open, and the human felt a rush of damp air from the dark inside. He hesitated for a second, then stepped after her, his boots crunching on broken pieces of glass scattered across the floor. The place smelled of smoke and earth, a hidden shelter built in the ruins. His eyes adjusted slowly, and then he saw her. A tall figure stood at the back of the room, half hidden by shadows. She was different from the girl, older and stronger, but her face carried the same faint glow in her eyes. Her skin was pale, but marked with strange patterns, like faint silver lines running across her arms. She was dressed in a long robe torn at the edges, but even in its ruined state, it gave her an air of grace. The girl ran forward and clung to her, speaking quickly. "Mother, this is him, the human I told you about. He gave me food." The woman looked at her daughter first, touching her cheek, brushing crumbs of bread still stuck near her mouth. Then her gaze lifted, sharp and focused, to the man standing in the doorway. Her expression was unreadable, neither anger nor gratitude, but something cautious, measuring him as though weighing every detail of his presence. The human cleared his throat. "I only shared what I had, that's all." The girl shook her head and stepped back, standing between them. "No, it is not all. He is different. He is the one I told you we should wait for." Her words hung in the air like a secret revealed too soon. The man frowned, feeling the weight of their eyes on him. "I think you've misunderstood. I was only passing through," he said. The girl's mother finally spoke, her voice calm but strong. "Humans do not pass through here, not anymore. This colony is abandoned, dangerous, yet here you are." Her words made his chest tighten. It was true. He had wandered too far into places others avoided. But her tone carried something else, suspicion mixed with curiosity. He noticed how she kept her body angled slightly in front of her daughter, protective even in this hidden space. The girl pulled at her mother's hand. "He is not like the others. He gave me food without asking anything. That means he is kind. That means he is meant for us." The man almost laughed at the childish certainty, but when he looked at the mother, he found no trace of amusement. Instead, she was studying him in silence, her glowing eyes flickering like embers. "You speak too boldly," she said to her daughter, but her voice carried no anger, only weariness. "We do not choose strangers so quickly." "But he is not a stranger anymore," the girl insisted. "He is the answer." The man shifted uneasily. He wanted to step back, to leave, but something kept him rooted in place. Maybe it was the hunger still visible in the girl's face, or the way her mother's eyes seemed to search for something beyond his words. Finally, he asked, "What exactly do you want from me?" The girl's answer came first, quick and sharp. "To be family, to be with us." Her mother's gaze softened at her daughter's eagerness, but she looked back at him with a more careful expression. "My daughter speaks without understanding the weight of her words. She has seen too much suffering. She clings to hope wherever she finds it." The girl stamped her foot lightly, her thin frame shaking with stubbornness. "It is not just hope. I know it is right." The man rubbed his temples, confusion pressing hard against his thoughts. He had expected only to give food and move on, not to be pulled into this strange, serious talk of family and destiny. Yet the way the girl spoke, the way her mother's silence filled the room, made it feel less like a game and more like the opening of something dangerous. The woman finally stepped closer, her tall figure moving with quiet strength. "You should leave before it becomes worse for you. Our kind is hunted. Anyone who stands with us is hunted too. You are human. You should not risk yourself." Her voice was meant as a warning, but the girl's sudden cry broke it apart. "No, don't send him away. He came here for a reason. You feel it too. You must." The mother closed her eyes for a moment, her face tight as though torn between two thoughts. When she opened them again, the glow in her gaze softened. She turned back to the man. "My daughter believes you are meant to be with us. I do not know if I share her faith, but I cannot ignore that she has spoken of you before you ever arrived." Her words struck him like a stone. "What do you mean, spoken of me?" "She dreamed of you," the mother answered quietly. For weeks, she described a traveler who would come from outside the ruins. A man who would feed her, a man who would not turn away. The man's heart thudded. He looked at the girl, who stared at him with complete certainty. I told you, she whispered. I waited for you. The silence after those words was heavy. The man's instincts told him to walk away, to escape this strange bond forming too quickly, but his conscience fought back. Leaving them now would feel like betrayal. The girl's hope burned too brightly, and even the mother, cautious as she was, seemed to be caught in something bigger than chance. The girl reached for his hand, her small fingers curling around his. Come with us, she said softly. Mother will see you are right. He looked at her hand, at the fragile warmth pressing against his skin, and then at the tall woman standing in front of him with eyes full of questions. His chest tightened again, torn between fear and a strange pull that made no sense. Outside, the sound of distant footsteps echoed faintly through the ruins. The girl's grip tightened, her eyes wide. See? They will find us if we stay. But if you stay with us, we will not be alone. The man glanced toward the door, then back at them. He realized he had no easy choice anymore. One act of kindness had led him into something that could not be undone. The sound of footsteps outside grew louder, echoing against the cracked walls of the ruined building. The human froze where he stood, his body tense, while the girl gripped his hand even tighter. Her glowing eyes widened with urgency. Her mother moved quickly, pulling aside a broken sheet of metal that covered a narrow passage at the back of the shelter. She motioned them to move. Inside, now, she whispered firmly, her voice low but sharp like a command. The human hesitated. Who's out there? He asked, but the woman gave him a look that silenced him. They are not friends, she said. If they see you here with us, they will kill you too. Her words sent a chill down his spine. He ducked into the narrow passage with the girl, who clung to him as if he was already her protector. The mother followed, sliding the metal back into place. They crouched in the darkness, the space so tight he could hear the girl's shaky breathing right beside his ear. Through the thin cracks in the wall, faint voices drifted inside. Harsh, guttural tones, alien words spoken with anger. The human could not understand the language, but he didn't need translation. The tone was enough. They were hunting. The mother's hand pressed lightly against his shoulder, keeping him still. Her body was calm, though her eyes glowed faintly in the dark like two embers. He watched her and realized she had done this many times before, hiding, listening, waiting for danger to pass. Minutes felt like hours. The voices came closer, boots crunching over debris. One of the intruders kicked the door, and the wood rattled. The girl stiffened against him, but the mother placed a finger on her lips to keep her silent. The human held his breath as the strangers spoke again, their laughter cold and cruel. He caught one word repeated several times, always spat out with venom, traitor. The footsteps moved slowly through the shelter, searching. A shadow passed across the cracks of light in the wall, and the human's heart pounded so hard he feared the sound would give them away. He was not trained for this. He had no weapon, no plan. Yet he felt the girl's tiny hand gripping his, her faith in him unshaken even as danger closed in. At last, after what felt like an eternity, the intruders left. Their boots scraped the ground, growing fainter until silence returned. The mother stayed still for several more minutes before finally sliding the metal aside. They crawled back into the shelter, the air heavy with dust. The human exhaled deeply, his chest aching from holding his breath. He turned to the mother. Who were they? Why are they after you? She stood tall again, her posture firm, though her face carried wariness. They are from another clan. When our people fell, they took power. To them we are enemies, unworthy to live, any who help us share our fate. The man frowned, trying to piece it together. But why? What makes you different? She looked at her daughter before answering. Because we did not bow. My mate refused to kneel to them, and they killed him for it. Now they hunt us to erase what is left of his bloodline. The girl stepped forward quickly. That is why you are here, she said, her voice almost desperate. You are not one of them. They will not suspect you. If you stay with us, we will be safe. Her words startled him again. He shook his head, trying to reason. Safe? No. I just saw what almost happened. They nearly found us. If I stay, I'll only make it worse for you. The girl's face hardened, her small body trembling with stubbornness. No, you will make it better. You already have. The mother studied him quietly, her eyes soft but full of something deeper, something like hope buried under years of fear. My daughter believes in you, she said slowly. But understand this truth. To stay with us is to be hunted. To walk away is to live. Your kind is not their enemy. You can still go back to safety. The human's stomach twisted at her words. Part of him wanted to walk out right then, to escape before he was dragged into something he didn't understand. But another part of him remembered the girl's desperate hunger, her glowing eyes looking at him as though he was already her protector. He remembered how she had said, "You gave me food, I will give you family." He sat down heavily on a cracked stone, running his hands through his hair. "I didn't come here looking for this," he muttered. "I was just passing through." The girl crouched in front of him, her hands clutching his knees as if she could anchor him to her. "Maybe you were passing through for a reason," she whispered. Her words pierced deeper than he expected. He looked into her eyes, then at the tall woman standing behind her. The mother was silent, but she did not look away. She seemed to be waiting, not forcing him, but giving him the choice. The air outside the shelter was still heavy with the memory of danger. He knew the intruders could return at any moment. His mind raced with questions, doubts, and fear. But his heart could not forget the girl's trembling hands when she had eaten his bread, nor the unshakable way she clung to him now. The mother finally spoke again, her voice quiet but steady. "You must decide soon. If you walk away now, you will survive. If you stay, you will share our fight." The human stared at the cracked floor, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but when he lifted his head, the girl's glowing eyes met his again, full of trust, full of certainty. And in that moment, he realized that leaving was not so simple anymore. The night was quiet at first, the air heavy with smoke drifting from broken buildings. The human sat inside the shelter with the mother and her daughter, his mind still full of doubts. He had not chosen to stay with them, not yet, but his feet had not moved to leave either. The girl had fallen asleep against his arm, her small body trusting him more than he trusted himself. The mother sat nearby, silent and watchful, her glowing eyes staring into the dark as if she could see something hidden there. Then the sound came, sharp, sudden, and too close. A crunch of boots outside the door. The human stiffened, his hand moving to the nearest thing he could use as a weapon, a broken piece of metal pipe lying against the wall. The mother rose quickly, her body tense, and pulled her daughter behind her. The door burst open with a violent crack. Figures stepped inside, tall and broad, their faces covered with rough masks, their weapons gleaming even in the weak moonlight that slipped through the roof. There were 4 of them, each moving with confidence, like hunters who had finally cornered their prey. "There they are," one growled in a harsh voice. He spoke in his own tongue, but the human understood enough from the tone. They were not here to talk. The mother stepped forward, blocking the way to her daughter. Her voice was strong, though her body trembled. "Leave this place. You will not take her." The men laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. One of them pointed at the girl, his voice dripping with venom. "The child of a traitor does not deserve to live. Move aside, woman." The human felt his chest tighten. He had told himself this was not his fight, but as he looked at the girl's terrified face, something inside him snapped. He could not sit back and watch. He gripped the pipe tighter, stood up, and moved beside the mother. "You'll have to go through me first," he said, his voice low but steady. The intruders paused, their glowing eyes narrowing at the sight of a human. Then they laughed again, louder this time. "A human? This is your protection? You must truly be desperate," one sneered. They rushed forward, expecting him to fall easily. The first swung his blade, but the human ducked and slammed the metal pipe into his stomach with all his strength. The man stumbled back with a grunt, surprised at the force. Another came at him fast, but the human grabbed a broken chair leg from the floor and hurled it into his attacker's face. The man cried out, blood spraying from his nose. The fight grew wild. The mother grabbed a shard of glass and slashed at one enemy who tried to reach her daughter. She moved with fierce energy, protecting her child with every breath. The human fought with desperation, every swing of his pipe fueled by the thought that if he failed, the girl would be taken. One of the attackers slammed into him, knocking him against the wall. The pipe clattered to the ground, and rough hands gripped his throat. The human gasped, vision blurring as he struggled for air. But he remembered the girl's words. "You are different. You are the one. With the last of his strength, he drove his knee hard into the attacker's ribs. The man released him with a pained grunt, and the human snatched the pipe back, swinging it with all his weight until the man collapsed. The others, seeing two of their companions down, hesitated. Their eyes flicked from the human to the mother, who stood tall, with blood dripping from her hand where the glass had cut her. The girl clung to her, her glowing eyes filled with both terror and awe as she stared at the human. "This is not finished," one of the men spat before retreating into the night with the others. Their footsteps faded, leaving silence behind. The human stood there, breathing heavily, sweat running down his face, the pipe still shaking in his hands. He had expected to die, but somehow he was still standing, and so were the mother and daughter. The mother looked at him, her expression unreadable. Slowly, she lowered the shard of glass and stepped closer. "You fought for us," she said quietly, almost like she couldn't believe it. He shook his head, his chest still rising and falling rapidly. "I didn't have a choice." But the girl's voice broke in, full of fierce certainty. "Yes, you did, and you chose us." Her words struck him harder than any blow he had taken in the fight. He stared at her, remembering how small and fragile she had seemed when he first saw her, starving and afraid. Now her eyes burned with something new, hope. The mother touched his shoulder, her hand warm despite the trembling in her fingers. "You understand now," she said softly. "To stay means to fight. To leave means abandoning us to death. Tonight, you have shown your choice without words." The human closed his eyes for a moment, exhausted. He had never asked for this battle, never asked to be tied to strangers in a ruined world. But standing there, with the girl safe and the mother's hand resting on him, he knew something had changed. He had crossed a line he could never step back over. The girl hugged him suddenly, her thin arms wrapping around his waist. "See, mother?" she whispered. "He is worthy." The mother's eyes softened as she looked at him, and for the first time her guarded expression cracked, revealing something almost like trust. The human stood silently, his heart heavy and uncertain, but one truth clear. He was no longer just a passerby. He was part of their fight now. The fire burned low in the corner of the cave, its flickering light throwing long shadows on the stone walls. The human sat with his back against the rough surface, his body still aching from the fight. The girl lay curled up close to him, finally asleep after hours of trembling fear. The mother sat across from him, her hands resting on her knees, her glowing eyes watching him in silence. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the crackling of the fire and the distant wind whistling through the rocks. Finally, the mother broke the silence. "You saved us," she said quietly, her voice soft but steady. He shifted uncomfortably, rubbing at his bruised arm. "I only fought because they would have killed all of us. I had no choice." She shook her head slowly. "Everyone has a choice. Many would have run, but you stood." Her words made him pause. He stared into the fire, watching the flames rise and fall. He thought of all the times he had promised himself never to get involved, never to risk his life for strangers. Yet here he was, sitting with two aliens who now depended on him. The mother leaned closer, her voice low. "You should know something. Among my people, there is an old custom. If a man saves a woman's life, he gains the right to stand at her side. Some call it a bond of protection. Some call it marriage." The human blinked in surprise. "Marriage? Just because of one fight?" She tilted her head, her silver-marked skin catching the firelight. "It is not just one fight. It is life owed. If he saves her again, it becomes life shared. Few dare to claim it, for it means taking not only the woman, but also her burdens. And my burdens are heavy." He frowned, unsure what to say. The girl stirred in her sleep and whispered his name softly, her small hand reaching out to clutch his sleeve even as she dreamed. The weight of her trust hit him harder than the mother's words. The woman's eyes softened as she watched her daughter. "She believes you are meant to stay. She has seen visions before, dreams that speak of truth. When she told me of the man who would feed her, I did not believe. Now you are here." The human shook his head, his voice almost a whisper. "I didn't come here for destiny. I just wanted to help her. I didn't ask for this." The mother's lips curved in the smallest of sad smiles. "No one ever asks. But fate does not ask either." The fire cracked, sparks flying upward. He thought about her words, about the danger he had seen in the eyes of those who had attacked them. If he left now, he might survive. But if he stayed, he would be hunted like them, never free again. The choice pressed down on him like a heavy chain. The mother leaned back, her gaze steady. You should know the truth of our enemies. They do not hunt only us for what we believe. They hunt because my daughter carries blood they fear. Her father was the last leader who stood against them. They killed him to break our line. If they kill her, no one will rise to challenge them again. The human's chest tightened. He looked at the girl's fragile body, sleeping without knowing how much danger her very existence carried. His throat felt dry as he asked, "And you? What about you?" Her voice grew quiet, almost like a confession. "I am her shield. I live only to keep her alive, but I am only one. Sooner or later, they will break me. That is why she dreams of someone else, someone who would not turn away." The human stared at her, torn between disbelief and something deeper he could not name. He wanted to deny it, to walk away from the weight being placed on him, but the girl's hand still gripped his sleeve, refusing to let go even in sleep. He whispered, "I don't know if I can be what you want me to be." The mother looked at him with a calmness that almost felt like faith. "You already are, whether you know it or not. Tonight proved that. My daughter calls you family. That is enough." Silence returned, heavy and endless. He leaned his head back against the cold stone wall, his mind racing. A part of him longed to leave, to wake before sunrise and disappear into the ruins. But when he closed his eyes, he saw the girl starving in the dust, the way her eyes had lit up when he gave her bread, and the way she had whispered, "I will give you family." The fire dimmed lower, shadows swallowing the walls. The mother finally lay down beside her daughter, pulling a worn blanket over them both. Before closing her eyes, she looked at him one last time. "Rest. Tomorrow will test you again." He stayed awake long after they slept, staring at the glowing embers. The night stretched on, and though fear gnawed at him, something else began to stir in his chest, a quiet, dangerous sense of belonging. By dawn, he realized he was no longer only a traveler passing through. Whether he wanted it or not, the bond between him and them had already begun to form, and breaking it would feel like breaking himself. The sky turned red as the sun sank behind the broken mountains, painting the ruins in long shadows. The human stood at the mouth of the cave, staring into the distance. He knew the enemy would come again. The fight last night had not scared them off. It had only warned them. They would return, stronger, more prepared. His body still carried bruises from the last attack, but his heart was heavier than his wounds. He was caught in something he never wanted, yet walking away now felt impossible. Behind him, the girl hummed softly while she played with small stones, her glowing eyes bright with innocent hope. The mother watched her carefully, her posture straight, her face calm, though there was a storm hidden in her expression. When she finally spoke, her voice was firm. "They will come tonight," she said. "This time, more of them." The human turned to face her. "And you plan to fight them alone?" Her jaw tightened. "If I must. My life does not matter if it keeps my daughter alive." He shook his head quickly, anger rising. "No, that's not how it works. You think she'll be safe if you die? She won't. They'll kill her too. That's what they want." The woman's eyes flashed with pain, but she looked away, unwilling to answer. The girl, sensing the tension, dropped the stones and ran to them. She clutched her mother's arm, then turned her glowing eyes to the human. "Don't fight each other," she whispered. "Fight for me. Together." The human crouched so he was at her level. "I promised myself I wouldn't get involved in wars that weren't mine. But then you came. And you don't give me a choice, do you?" The girl smiled faintly, her small hand resting on his shoulder. "You already chose. You just don't see it yet." The mother looked at him, her expression softening for the first time. She said nothing, but her silence was more powerful than words. As the sun slipped lower, they prepared. The mother gathered what little they had: shards of metal, a broken spear, and an old cloak to hide her daughter. The human searched outside and found heavy stones he could throw, long wooden sticks that could serve as spears. He worked quietly, his mind focused not on survival, but on the faces that now depended on him. When the first noise of movement reached them, the girl pressed close to her mother. The human gripped the metal pipe he had kept from the last fight. His palms were sweaty, but his heart beat steady now. He had already decided, if death came, it would come while standing with them. Shadows moved at the edge of the ruins. Then figures appeared, more than before. 6 of them, maybe 7, their weapons glinting in the fading light. They advanced with cruel smiles, their voices loud and mocking. "There she is," one shouted. "The traitor's line ends tonight." The mother pulled her daughter close, but before she could step forward, the human raised the pipe and stood in front of them. His voice cut through the evening air. "You'll have to kill me first." The enemies laughed at him. "A human? Do you think your fragile bones can stop us?" But the human did not move aside. He planted his feet, his grip tight, his body ready. Something in his defiance made them pause for just a moment. The mother stepped beside him, her glass shard in hand. "We fight together," she said firmly. The girl clutched the cloak, her eyes shining with both fear and pride. The enemy charged. The fight erupted in chaos. One swung at the human, but he ducked and smashed the pipe against the man's knee. The scream that followed filled the night. Another tried to strike from behind, but the mother slashed at his arm, forcing him back. The human fought like a cornered animal, every strike wild but full of strength. He used the ruins around him, pushing one enemy into a wall, grabbing a rock and throwing it into another's face. Blood splattered, shouts echoed, and the clash of metal against metal filled the air. But there were too many. One attacker grabbed the mother's arm, twisting it hard. She cried out, dropping her shard. Another lunged for the girl, who screamed, her small body trying to hide under the cloak. The human roared with fury and hurled himself forward. He slammed into the man holding the mother, sending them both crashing to the ground. He punched, kicked, swung the pipe until the man lay still. Then he scrambled up, just in time to block the one reaching for the girl. He slammed the pipe into the attacker's chest, forcing him back. Pain shot through his side as another blade sliced his ribs. He staggered, blood soaking his shirt, but he refused to fall. He raised the pipe again, even as his vision blurred. The mother picked up the shard and stood at his side, her face fierce despite the blood dripping from her hand. "You will not touch her," she said, her voice shaking with rage. Together, they fought like one. Blow after blow, they drove the attackers back. Their enemies, who had expected easy victory, now stumbled in confusion. A human and a widow, standing shoulder to shoulder, refusing to break. At last, the attackers faltered. 2 lay groaning on the ground, one bled from a deep cut, and the rest stepped back, their confidence broken. One spat on the ground, glaring with hate. "This isn't over," he growled before retreating into the darkness with the others. The night grew silent again, broken only by the sound of heavy breathing. The human dropped the pipe, falling to his knees, his hand pressed against his bleeding side. The girl ran to him, tears streaming down her face as she clung to him tightly. "You said you would die with us if you must," she cried. "But you didn't die. You fought for us. You are ours now." The mother knelt beside them, her glowing eyes soft with something new. She touched his shoulder gently. "You have already made your choice," she whispered. "You may not see it yet, but you are part of us." The human closed his eyes, pain coursing through his body, but in that moment, he felt something stronger than fear. He felt the weight of belonging. He had stood when he could have run, and because of that, they were still alive. The night faded slowly, and the first light of morning painted the ruins in a soft gray glow. The human sat by the cave wall, his body weak, his shirt torn and soaked with blood from the wound in his side. Every breath hurt, but he stayed awake, watching the girl sleep peacefully against her mother's chest. For the first time since he had met them, the child looked safe. The fire had burned low, giving only a faint warmth, yet the silence felt different now. It was no longer the silence of fear, but of survival. The mother opened her eyes and looked at him. Her glowing gaze was calm but full of meaning. She had watched him fight, watched him bleed, and watched him stand even when he should have fallen. Slowly, she shifted the girl to rest more comfortably, then crossed the space between them. She knelt in front of him, her hand brushing the dirt from his cheek. "You should be dead," she whispered. "But you are not, because you chose to stand with us." He gave a faint, tired smile. "Maybe I'm just too stubborn to die." Her lips curved into the smallest smile, though her eyes were wet. "No, you are alive because you have purpose now." She glanced at her daughter, then back at him. We are not alone anymore. You gave us that. He lowered his head, unsure how to answer. He had never wanted to be a hero, never wanted to carry someone else's life in his hands. But now he realized he already carried two. The girl's small voice echoed in his memory. You are ours now. The sound of movement outside broke his thoughts. His hand tightened on the metal pipe lying at his side, but this time it was not the heavy steps of enemies. Instead, it was the faint shuffle of curious survivors, neighbors from hidden corners of the ruins who had heard the fight in the night and come to see. Their glowing eyes peeked through the cracks, cautious and uncertain. One of them stepped closer, an old man with bent shoulders and a scar across his face. He stared at the human with disbelief. A human fought them? He asked in a low, rough voice. The mother stood tall beside the human. He did more than fight. He saved us. He saved my daughter. The old man shook his head slowly, as if he could not believe it. No human ever stood with us before. Why would he risk his life for outcasts? The girl woke then, rubbing her eyes, her small face lighting up when she saw the human still alive. She ran to him, wrapping her arms around his neck. Because he is family, she said loudly, her voice echoing in the cave. He gave me bread, he fought for me, and he promised he would not leave. The survivors murmured among themselves. Some looked doubtful, others curious, but none could ignore the truth in the child's words. The human struggled to stand, his legs shaking under him. He leaned on the pipe for balance, his chest rising with effort. I don't know what comes next, he admitted, his voice rough but strong. But I know this. No child deserves to be hunted. No family deserves to be broken. If I have to fight again, I will. Not because I asked for it, but because walking away now would be the same as killing them myself. His words carried weight, heavier than he expected. The mother stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. He is no longer just a traveler, she declared. He is part of us. He is our shield, and we are his. The girl smiled brightly, her eyes glowing like twin stars. She looked up at her mother, then at him. We are not broken anymore. We are whole. The survivors outside lowered their heads in respect. For them, hope had long been a dead word, but seeing a human bleed for someone not his own awakened something buried deep. They began to whisper that maybe the old ways were not gone, that maybe resistance still lived. The human felt the weight of their eyes, but he did not flinch. He no longer felt like a stranger. The bond he had tried to deny was now real, carved into him with blood and fire. As the sun rose higher, the mother led him outside. The ruins stretched far, silent and scarred, but for the first time, they did not feel empty. She turned to him, her voice soft but firm. You gave us hope when we had none. If you accept, you are no longer a wanderer. You are family. You are ours. The human met her gaze, then looked at the girl clutching his hand tightly. He thought of the moment he first saw her, starving and trembling behind the wall, her eyes full of fear but also light. That single act of kindness, a piece of bread, had pulled him into a story he never expected. Now he could not imagine stepping away. He nodded slowly, his voice steady. Then I accept. The girl cheered softly, hugging him as though she had won the world. The mother's lips trembled with emotion, but her glowing eyes held strength. She knew what this meant, not only survival, but the beginning of something new. The human stood with them, his body still weak, but his spirit unbroken. He no longer felt like a man passing through ruins. He felt like he belonged, tied to them by choice, by blood spilled, and by the promise of tomorrow. And as the light of morning spread over the broken land, the human realized that his life had changed forever. Not because he had given food to a hungry child, but because that child had given him something far greater, a family, a reason, a future.